Hey there, welcome back. Okay, we're looking at Corporate Law 101, an entrepreneur's guide, and this is section 2, part 3, the share ledger. Okay, this is probably the single most important part of this training session, so please, if I can, I want to have your attention, okay? We're going to talk about a few things here as we go, and we're going to talk about what a stock ledger is, and then we're actually physically going to go over and work with a stock ledger inside of an application called Legal Book and Seal, and we'll show you the functionality that this stock ledger actually functions within your company. Let me kind of give you a big background. The stock ledger is where the corporation keeps accurate records of the stock transactions, and they usually keep them as part of what is called a book and seal or a book records book. Okay, the stock transfer ledger is used when shares are sold. They can be transferred, and we'll show you how that fits into the stock table ledger, and surrendered or lost, because you have shareholders that lose shares. You have to count for those as well. Keep in mind that each certificate can be issued for more than one share of stock. So you can issue a stock certificate for 100 shares, something to that effect. Of course, the stock ledger is only one part of the corporate records that you must keep and need to be maintained inside of a corporate book and record. All the transactions regarding the shares of the business must be recorded in the stock ledger, including when shares were initially issued and any stock transfers that occur. The stock ledger should also include any shares which are surrendered or lost. The things that you're going to want to keep track of: name of the shareholder, their complete mailing address, the stock certificate numbers, and that's very important that you keep track of which stock certificates belong to which owners, the total number of shares outstanding, the date of the shares were purchased, how much the person paid for each share, the class of shares, and why the shares were transferred. Okay, so why do we keep a stock ledger? Well, the stock ledger makes it possible to identify all of the shareholders of the corporation at any given time. It's a summary of events as you record stock transactions after they occur. And it's very important because especially busy owners forget how that transaction actually went down. They forget that they actually got paid. Somebody has to go track that stuff down, and it's often very hard and makes the shareholders very angry. It's a working document of all the current and previous shareholders of the company and contains the personal data of the shareholders and the shares that they own. Legal Book and Seal also includes things like directors' information and things of that sort. But let's take a look here. The name of the shareholder, the place of residence, the time that they became the owners, what's their certificate number, and what order were they issued? Where did the shares come from? In this case, they came from treasury shares, and these people paid different amounts of money for those shares over a period of time. So 531 paid more for its 4,400 shares. So you have to understand, and this is how you determine valuation of the company as well. So let's go back here for a moment. We're going to try to track the shares and unit percentages outstanding for the company on what is called a stock table or a stock ledger. A stock ledger is where you collect the data. A stock table is where that is printed out, if you will. And you want to see a fully diluted table here. The fully diluted table means that you've got all of your options and the warrants, and we'll talk about what those are next, against the authorized shares. So it's not just the stocks and units, but it's plus the options and the warrants, so that you're seeing the total against authorized shares. That's what a fully diluted table is. And the mathematics for this, especially with dilutable and non-dilutable shares, can be very, very tricky. And that's one of the things that the software does very accurately. And you want to basically certify the accuracy of the shares to the shareholders because you're a fiduciary, whoever's keeping these records, and the board of directors is signing off on them as fiduciaries. Remember, that's potential liability to those investors if you didn't do it right. So a fiduciary has responsibilities. Now, you also have potential for fraud personally if you do wrongful acts. And for example, some of those might be exceeding the 100% authorized shares. Ooh, that's a big no-no. Selling the same shares to multiple shareholders. Again, a real problem. And the liability to the company for mismanagement of share ownership is pretty powerful because they don't like that mismanagement, especially when you're the senior parties in the company and you're trying to harm the minorities. And of course, minorities have rights. One of the things they have the rights to is within 72 hours, they can cause you to produce the corporate books showing the accurate records of these fiduciary duties for all of these shares. Imagine trying to make that up in the middle of the night. Gets to be real fun. The stock ledger also must be kept up to date and should be updated every time a transaction involves shares happens. Transfers of new purchases of stock should be recorded as part of the transaction process. The stock ledger is made available to potential investors, and it has to be accurate for all current shareholders as of the date that they get it. Again, it's the permanent record of the company. Other names for it, you might call it a register. You might call it a stock transfer ledger. Might call it a corporate stock ledger, stock book, something to that effect. They're all fine. They are a ledger of the stock transactions. That's basically what they are. And again, if we go to this page again, this is the stock transfer ledger from legalbookandseal.com. Here, if you wanted to go and add someone, you would push the add sign. They would give you the information on the number of shares, the shareholders, their place of residence, the times of owners, the certificates, how many shares they're being issued. And then, of course, you can make changes here for the number of shares, including adding shareholders here. So this is how you go about functionally adding new shareholders along the way. And then, of course, the information related to the share table will change based upon this information. Typically, people hand a stock certificate to a shareholder and then document the exchange in the company's stock transfer ledger, which, if utilized, is the proper record of transfer, so nobody can argue it. And if the secretary of the company and things of that sort go about making sure that they sign off on those things with the president, you have very little trouble keeping track of who they are. The stock ledger then, as well as the corporate seal, and most of the company's other important documents should be held inside of a system like legalbookandseal.com, where they can have a digital vault for the documents, as well as all of the information on shareholders, shares, things of that sort. And that would be controlled generally by a company secretary, a corporation secretary. This will ensure that the safekeeping of the ledger itself, which holds the information, the important information for the company. So that's what a stock ledger is and how it works. And that's it for now for this tutorial. Copyright 2017, BrainTech CSI Inc., all rights reserved.